There are 4 pieces of legislation that you need to be aware of if you're going to succeed at buying and selling real estate in 2022. Let's cover them. Hey, my name is Struzyna. Welcome back to the channel. If you're here, you are looking for ways to succeed in the East Bay real estate market. And that's exactly what we talk about on this channel. Tips, tricks, ideas, anecdotes, stats, you name it. Anything that you can learn or glean to get an edge here in this competitive real estate landscape, you're gonna find it on this channel. So go ahead and subscribe and like the video because I'm gonna put out content every single week and you're not gonna wanna miss any of it. So as we round out 2021 and look forward to what's coming in 2022, the next handful of videos I'm gonna put out are basically gonna be recaps of what happened this year and what it's teeing up for next year. So hopefully this will give you a good sense of where we've been, so we can try to figure out where we're going. And in this video, specifically, I want to talk about 4 pieces of legislation that passed or came into effect this year in some capacity that will affect the real estate landscape going forward. And hopefully you'll get a sense of how it might impact you, or in a couple of cases, it might not. But let's go ahead and dig into these things. All right, so first piece is something that a lot of people are aware of and has kind of a secondary piece that you might not be. First of all, it's Prop 19. That was what was passed in the general election in 2020 and implemented in 2021, where it allowed homeowners who were over 55, severely disabled, or displaced by natural disaster like a fire or an earthquake, to take their tax basis and move it anywhere in California. Previously, you had to do that on a county by county basis, and there were limits to how many times you could do this. It got away with all of that, and now you can move anywhere in the state, right? And take your original tax basis with you, which was the idea, really great to help people downsize and move into something that was more appropriate for where they were in their stage of life, but wouldn't kill them on the property tax increase. So it has this attachment, Senate Bill 539, which has to do with the application of Prop 19, how you can actually pass this tax down to heirs and grandkids and kids through trusts and that sort of thing. It really boils down to the property has to remain a principal residence. So it has to have been a principal residence and will continue to be one for the person receiving it. So if grandparents lived in the home, they pass it to the grandchildren who then intend to move into that house within a year, the property tax basis can pass along. But if someone is going to have a second home or an investment property, that tax basis doesn't transfer in the same way as it used to. I know there's a lot of litigation, a lot of controversy on this one right now. And so that piece in particular is going to be really interesting to see how all the trust and estate attorneys figure that out and work that out, because I know that there's some people, I have a few prospective clients who are considering this themselves as to what is going to happen. If that stands, they're probably going to sell. If it doesn't stand, and then they might keep the tax basis and continue renting the property. So that will be a really interesting one to watch here coming up in 2022. All right, so the second one is something that I did a video on recently called Senate Bill 9. I'll post the video up here. It's Senate Bill 8, 9, and 10. Which was talking about specifically single family zoning. And this law at a state level created a streamlined process for people to take a single family residence and make it more dense. Because we have a housing shortage, if you haven't noticed, and they're trying to figure out ways to create more units and create it in this single family zoning, which has excluded the ability to create more density in certain neighborhoods, has created higher prices and less supply to feed the demand and that sort of thing. So this was one potential answer. So it creates this streamlined process for people to create multiple lots or subdivide their large single family lot into several smaller parcels and build smaller homes on them as well. So this one takes effect January 1st, 2022, and obviously will have a longer tail as far as what the actual effect is, because construction and permitting and all that stuff takes a lot of time, but it's going to be something that changes probably the way people value, especially larger lot single family homes in certain neighborhoods, and then what that's going to do long term to the value and desirability of certain neighborhoods. Maybe some will go up, some will go down. That will be really interesting to see what happens. But that's one to pay attention to more in the long run though. The third one that I want you to pay attention to doesn't directly impact you as a buyer or a seller, but it does your agent. It's Senate Bill 263, and it's going to require implicit bias training for all real estate licensees for their continuing education. It's not going to come into effect until early 2023, so it's not going to be required at all the next calendar year as it's written today. But it is something that is on the mind of the real estate community broadly relative to bias. You've probably seen a number of articles or videos about people being treated differently in appraisals or purchase situations relative to their race, religion, protected class in general. I've done some videos, I'll link to those up here, about the buyer love letter practice. This is under the gun, and this is one thing at the state level that's going to be happening. Obviously, it's not going to be required until early 2023, so the net effect of it won't be felt specifically on this one until then, I would say, at least. But the net effect here though is that anything that has to do with bias on any kind of protected class, fair housing, that's all being focused on and under the gun pretty significantly right now. And it will be interesting to see how some of these practices that have been in place, like the buyer love letter that I've done a video on and talked about earlier, how that comes up and how that's scrutinized further in 2022, and how that might actually affect one way or another the buying and selling process. So this is just conceptually something to be aware of, but then this training is something that's going to be starting to require people like myself here in 2023. And the last one is AB 491. This is going to impact a relatively small number of people overall, but it sort of goes back to the previous one about the implicit bias training, in that equality is something that's on the mind of a lot of people. So what this bill did was eliminate the ability to discriminate in mixed income developments relative to the use of common areas. So if you're watching a lot of new construction like in Alameda or Oakland, there is a requirement by the builder to create a certain amount of below market housing or fixed rate housing. They all have a couple different names. So basically it's either held at a certain price and it can never be sold above or below a certain number, and it has to be sold to certain people who meet certain income requirements. And then there's the rest of the project, right? So there's the controlled rate fixed portion. I think it's usually in the 10 to 15% of the total units. And then you've got the rest of the units that are probably going to be sold at the high-end luxury, right? So you've got a bit of a discrepancy relative to the types of people who are going to be moving in from the income demographic standpoint. And so the way it used to be prior to this passage was that lower or controlled income people were only allowed to use certain areas or certain entrances, and then the other owners or renters were able to use the other areas, right? And so there was this clear divide between the two groups, even though they literally lived in the same complex or the same building in some cases. So this did away with all of that, and now it has made that a discriminatory practice and something that is just not going to be part of our real estate future going forward. So again, the third and the fourth option here that I just discussed, it's talking about this inclusion, bias, racism, all of that stuff as it pertains to housing. So what you can see there again is that there is a push to create a more equal and a more fair equality standpoint relative to housing and the rules that govern it. So with that, hopefully you got something out of that. And since I know you did, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, because I am going to start putting out more content around the market, what's going on, what's been happening, and then where we're probably going in 2022 over the next couple weeks, and you're not going to want to miss it. So without any further ado, this is Hans Struzyna with the Gunderman Group at Keller Williams Luxury International signing off for now. See you on the next one.